Hi, welcome to Radio Horror FM. My name is William, and I'll be the guide to your nighttime fears tonight. Tonight's story is about a man who looked like someone you might trust. A man who could hold a conversation, smile politely, and blend perfectly into a crowd. Friends described him as intelligent. Teachers described him as promising. Strangers described him as charming. But behind that calm and ordinary appearance was one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. This is the story of Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was born in 1946. From the outside, his childhood appeared relatively normal, but many investigators later believed his early life was far more complicated than it seemed. For years, Bundy was told that his grandparents were actually his parents, and that his real mother was his older sister. The truth about his family was hidden from him for a long time. Some psychologists believe this confusion about his identity may have deeply affected him. As he grew older, Bundy became intelligent and ambitious. He attended college and later studied law. To people around him, he appeared focused and motivated. Nothing about him suggested that he would one day become a murderer, but beneath the surface, something darker was growing. In 1974, a series of mysterious disappearances began in the state of Washington. Young women started vanishing. Many of them were college students. Several had long dark hair parted down the middle. At first, police believed the cases were unrelated, but soon a pattern began to emerge. Witnesses reported seeing a man approaching women in public places, sometimes in university parking lots, sometimes near libraries or parks, and almost every time he appeared injured. The man often wore a sling or fake cast on his arm. He would politely ask women for help carrying books or loading something into his car. To most people, he seemed harmless. After all, he looked like someone who genuinely needed assistance. Many victims simply thought they were helping a stranger, but once they got close enough, Bundy attacked. He would overpower them quickly and force them into his vehicle. From there, they disappeared. Eventually, investigators discovered an important clue. Several women who survived encounters with the suspect reported something strange. The man had introduced himself as Ted. Around the same time, witnesses also reported seeing a small car near the locations where women disappeared. A Volkswagen Beetle. That detail would later become extremely important because Ted Bundy owned one. As the disappearances continued, police struggled to connect the crimes. The attacks were spread across multiple areas, and Bundy carefully avoided leaving clear evidence behind. But investigators slowly began building a profile. The suspect was believed to be educated, organized, and extremely manipulative. He knew how to gain people's trust, and that made him especially dangerous. In 1975, police in Utah stopped Bundy during a routine traffic stop. Officers searched his car and discovered several unusual items. Handcuffs, a ski mask, rope, tape, and other suspicious tools. Although none of these items proved murder on their own, they raised serious questions. Soon after, witnesses began identifying Bundy in police lineups, and he quickly became the main suspect in multiple disappearances. Bundy was eventually transferred to Colorado to face additional charges, but what happened next shocked the entire country. While being escorted inside a courthouse in 1977, Bundy managed to escape. He jumped from a second-story window and ran into the mountains. For several days, one of the most dangerous suspects in America was free. Authorities eventually recaptured him, but the story didn't end there. Months later, Bundy made an even more daring escape. Inside his jail cell, he slowly carved a hole in the ceiling. He had also secretly been losing weight for weeks so he could fit through the small opening. One night, he climbed into the ceiling space and disappeared. When guards checked his cell the next morning, Ted Bundy was gone. After escaping, Bundy traveled across the country to Florida. There, his crimes became even more brutal. In January 1978, Bundy entered a university sorority house during the night, while the residents slept. He attacked multiple students. 2 young women were murdered. Several others were severely injured but survived. The violence shocked the entire nation. And finally, investigators were able to connect Bundy to the attack. Shortly after the sorority house murders, Bundy was arrested once again. This time, there would be no escape. Evidence linking him to the Florida crimes was strong, and the investigation into his earlier murders continued. The full scale of his crimes was beginning to emerge. Bundy's trial became a media spectacle. Television cameras broadcast the courtroom proceedings across the country. Millions of people watched. At times, Bundy even chose to act as his own lawyer. He cross-examined witnesses, questioned evidence, and attempted to manipulate the courtroom. But despite his confidence, the evidence against him was overwhelming. In 1979, Bundy was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. For years afterward, he continued to deny responsibility for many of the killings. But as his execution date approached, he began confessing. Investigators eventually linked him to more than 30 murders. However, many believe the real number may be even higher, because Bundy often traveled between states and some victims were never found. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed at Florida State Prison. Outside the prison walls, crowds gathered. Some people held signs. Others celebrated the end of one of America's most notorious killers. For many families, it was the closest thing to justice they would ever receive. Closing. The story of Ted Bundy left investigators with an unsettling realization. Monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like the person standing next to you, polite, friendly, normal. And that may be the most terrifying part of all. You were listening to Radio Horror FM. Sleep carefully tonight.